Shabbat Shalom. This week's Parsha is Hayyei Sarah, which literally means the life of Sarah. But actually what the Parsha is about, at least in its beginning, is the death of Sarah, which we read about at the end of last week's Parsha, that after the episode of the Akedah, where Abraham binds Isaac up on the mountain in order to kill him, when Sarah hears about it, apparently she died. And now the Parsha begins with Abraham arranging for her burial. And Abraham comes to Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron, because that's where Sarah is living and where she has died. Abraham has his eye on her burial place. He has selected a field that contains a cave that we know as Machpelah. And Abraham comes to the Hittites who were there at the time in order to arrange the purchase of the land in order to bury Sarah. So why doesn't Abraham bury Sarah in the cave? After all, did not God give Abraham the entire land? Is Abraham not the legitimate owner of the land? Instead, Abraham comes to the Hittites and he says, Ger v'toshav anochi imachem. I'm an alien and a resident among you. And everyone who has read this story from the beginning of the Torah understands that Ger, alien, and Toshav, resident, are mutually exclusive terms. How can one be a resident alien? Either you live there, you're a citizen, or you're from some other place and have no rights. But you can't be both. Rashi, reading the Midrash Breshit Rabbah, tells us that what Abraham had in mind was that he is both a ger and a toshav, that if they give him the land, then he is a toshav, he is a resident. But if they sell him the land, then they are treating him as a ger, as an alien. Either way, Abraham is prepared to do what he needs to do to get that cave. And there is a marvelous scene of negotiation that takes place between first the Hittites as a group and Abraham, and then Ephron, the owner of the field, and Abraham. And there is a negotiating dance that takes place until finally Abraham pays 400 silver shekels, an enormous sum, for the property. But if God had promised this land to Abraham, if God had said, Abraham, this land is your land, why all of the negotiations? Why the Masa Umatan, the back and forth of the bargaining for Abraham to purchase the land? Why didn't he just bury Sarah? And the answer is instructive. Because the Torah, the most sacred document in Jewish life, is not a recognized international trust deed. Because it's written in the Torah, which we hold sacred, does not mean the whole earth holds it to be sacred. And therefore, Abraham had to do what was acceptable in the eyes, not just the future Jewish people, but in his neighbors as well. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that negotiation is always preferred to battle and warfare. And Abraham could have gone to war. After all, he had just defeated 4 of the most powerful kings in the neighborhood. He was a warrior. And yet, before picking up his sword and his shield, before threatening sanctions and invasions, Abraham negotiated. And he offered whatever it took to achieve his goal without violence and without force. That is the way of Torah. That is the way of godliness. Words are harder sometimes than the deeds of warfare. But it was greater courage that Avraham showed by negotiating and getting what he wanted than going into battle itself. Shabbat Shalom. May you have a Zis and Shabbos.